Maybe I'll start with you, Stan. If we look in 20 years from now, do you think the bike will take over in the urban environment?
I don't think the bike will take over, but I think there'll be a much different balance than there is today. I think that in order to get there, there's got to be continued component and bike innovation. However, I think the biggest job is going to be the job of our cycling advocates to create safer cycling infrastructure in the cities. And so, Kevin, really that vision is up to you and Randy.
Stephan, on your side, you come from a different world. You maybe have a different vision. How do you see things in 20 years from now?
Yeah. I think that the direction is going on, that the bike market is growing more and more, especially the electrified bikes. But there must be some technical issues and design issues be solved, that it's really being accepted wide. So it must be, the product must be much more reliable from the cable tree, the batteries, the software. Still, most of the bikes are conversions. So traditional bike manufacturers just put on a motor, a battery, and that's it. And this causes a lot of problems because the real manufacturer is not aware and doesn't know about electrification, electronics. It's something completely new for the bike market. And these companies have to learn rapidly, otherwise other manufacturers, maybe car industry, is taking over this field of electric two-wheelers. And it's also about the design, about theft protection. The bikes are very expensive compared to regular bicycles. So people are afraid when I put it, especially in old city areas where they cannot carry the bike in the fourth floor, it stands outside. How do I know that it's not touched, not stolen? What electronic solutions could be made? What about the design, the rigidity of the bike, like these rental systems? How robust is it that it withstands this daily use? And there must be, at the end, some solutions. It's not BMW way, but a very reliable, simple electrified bike that is affordable for the masses. This is because it's still a very high price thing. It's hip at the moment. Everybody wants it, but this curve will lower in the future as soon as someone brings the people bike that's really affordable, cool, and has all these aspects. Also, luggage transport is a big aspect. How do I put my laptop when I commute to work every day, and so on?
Stephan, I think there are a lot of challenges with the electronics, and you're right. The bicycle industry is not the most experienced in the electronic world. However, I don't think the future solution is just going to be electronic bikes. I would think that in the urban setting, that the majority of the bikes in an urban setting would still be straight mechanical, without the complexity, without the weight, without the maintenance of electronic. I think electronic will be an important part of it, and I think it will extend the range and extend, how people use it. But I can imagine that, the simple mechanical bike is still going to be the majority of the bikes used in that setting.
Quantity-wise, but from the turnover and from the earnings, the electric bikes is much more interesting. So that's our observation, that all bike dealers are so happy that they have a much bigger margin now with the electric bikes and sell them like hell, instead of these $200-300 bikes. And it will be both. There's no either or. But I think that and also in the bike business, there will be a separation of pure electric pedelec dealers and traditional, mechanical.
And I like your point that the automotive dealer might like selling the electric bike, and they see the margin on the bike being higher than
They don't like bikes.
Okay, but I think there's an opportunity. I think there's an opportunity for the bike industry to create as much value and emotion for an urban bike as there currently is for a racing bike that costs 10,000 euros. It won't be quite as easy because we don't have the competition to back it up. But the fact of the matter is that your cars today can go 200 miles an hour, and I see them all over the place in the city of Chicago, and they don't go faster than 30 miles an hour. And that's the emotional connection that people create with the bike. And I think that's a challenge and an opportunity that the bike industry has to increase the price point on urban bikes, not to just charge a higher price, but to give people a better experience for what they're looking for.
But that gap will be filled from two sides, I think. I think there will be a whole new category of light electric vehicles in a few years, I think. A few of them coming from the car industry, some from the bicycle industry, but also from totally new players. So I think the landscape will look totally different in 10 years. Far less cars, I think, and a lot more light vehicles. Some of them are bikes, some of them are power assisted, some of them are full electrics.
So John, you've had an interesting experience in the Netherlands with, being the highest price point bicycle country and evolving from the mechanical to the electronic.
Right.
And do you see at some point that potentially shifting back with different technologies, maybe different value propositions?
Yeah, I think of course the e-bikes are generating a lot of profit at the moment, but they won't replace urban bikes. The urban bikes need to be simple, they need to withstand the environment, and they are placed outside all the time. So those are different vehicles. So there will always be a market for very clean and simple and robust urban bikes. And technology-wise, it's not about performance, but it's about endurance and fit for purpose.
I think if you take the original concept, which is relationship car bike, if you take the kind of policy direction, something like the EU is actually saying we will have zero carbon city centres by 2030. Now that doesn't mean no vehicles, but it does mean renewably fueled electric, both cargo vehicles and other things, as well as bicycles and other things in that mix. So there's a kind of policy directive that is pushing incredibly hard that way. I know plenty of advocates who roughly think that all we have to do is sit there and wait for the electrical supply chain and the oil supply chain to collapse, and the bicycle will somehow magically rule the world. I think that's a fantasy, even in the kind of most extreme ends of advocacy, because there's people like Stephan and others. The car industry is an extraordinarily resilient industry and will find its way into broader mobility, and I think the categories will merge. Because if you take the current investment of 20, 30, 40, 50,000 euros in a car, people are going to have that kind of money to spend on mobility, even if the car is priced out by fuel points, that kind of thing. So the alternatives, can I spend it on an electric vehicle? Can I spend it on personal mobility? Do I have that kind of money? There's a whole cash flow available for mobility, particularly in the kind of middle classes. And secondly, our economy in Europe and the US is driven on effectively car-based mobility. We have some vibrant city centres and shopping patterns, but we've all got out-of-town stores. We've all got a whole kind of retail thing. We've all got an expectation of fresh food every day. That means those kind of goods have to be serviced in ways. So there's going to be a massive shift. But the idea that there isn't personalised, motorised mobility by 2030, I think, is a fantasy. But I do think the bicycle, in all of its forms, electrical and combustible, what kind of share could it grow to? It could realistically be up there regularly in the kind of 50% plus, which compared to countries like the UK is that's a 25 times multiplication of kind of market share, and it would still only get to 50%. So we can see huge good times, but I don't think we see, even in the advocacy world, we don't see a kind of 100% just sit here and wait for it all to turn back into kind of 1950s China. It isn't going to happen.
Stan, you told yesterday, I think, a story that was interesting to a smaller group, and maybe you could tell a larger group. in terms of the influence of cycling on economy and businesses, where the impact it has with local communities as well.
Yeah, thanks, Gaetan. So, about a month ago, I was having a conversation with mayor of one of the mid-sized cities in the United States, and he was a large proponent of better cycling infrastructure for his city. And the reason for that was he saw it as really being instrumental in building the community. He saw his citizens getting in their cars and driving outside of the community to spend their money, as opposed to staying inside the community to spend their money. He saw them filling up their tanks with gasoline, as opposed to spending that money in restaurants in his community. And so he had a very interesting take on cycling. He said, the more that I can put a smile on people's face and let them cycle around the community and be part of the community, the more all the economics that those people have in their wallet are going to stay local. The more that I force them into a car, the more they're going to drive 5 miles or 10 miles and spend their money outside of my city center. And so he was very interested in creating the best cycling infrastructure he could, so he could keep all those people local.
That's exactly the model we know in tourism. It's cycle tourists per kilometre travelled, per day spent, per time in a district, spend more. Now, one can argue, because they're always hungry, they're like a plague of locusts descending, you all know, when you send in the cyclists, they eat everything. But but it's more about the short distances. You keep them in communities, they pass through towns that people bypass in their cars. So, and even, increasingly urban tourism. If I'm going to take a leisure journey, do I get in my car and drive to the national park 100 kilometres away, or is there an urban park? Is there something recreational rides? And I think this morning's ride down here by the river, the idea that families could use recreational parks, and I know many people here will regulars at the Taipei Cycle Show. You've only got to see the riverside cycle paths in Taipei to realise they've captured the dollars spent every weekend within the city boundaries. Right. And so you've got an engine for a whole new economy kept within the city. So that migrates not only from daily activity and purchases, but it also means the recreational markets can be kept captive as well. And that's a huge economic lever for a city.
Yeah. John, if we look at design and your field, how do you see that actually influencing urban mobility and specifically cycling and the way it's going to evolve in urban mobility?
That's a difficult one. Well, one thing I see in Amsterdam, but at least throughout Europe, that there's, besides normal bicycles, there's a lot of application bikes, like the bakfiets, the carrier bicycle, the rickshaws that are filling our cities more and more, delivery by bicycle messengers. So there's a lot of professional use of the bicycle that I'm not aware if SRAM is focusing on, for instance. So I think that's a very interesting field. Besides the normal bicycles. In normal bicycling, I think that was what you were referring to. The last years, a lot of more affordable but very fashionable brands have emerged, and they are doing very well. They sell good bicycles for like 400, 500 euros, where we were accustomed to spend a lot more on our Batavises and Gazelles. Mm-hmm. So that's something that will not go back. So the e-bikes, they did a good thing for those brands, of course, but I think that category of bikes will not come back to its old glory, I would say. So the thing that we can do as designers is to design the best possible bicycle for typical use. So get rid of all the stuff that can get broken or can get stolen or can get lost, and think about the target users, because even in urban commuting there's still a lot of different types of use that you can address. So that's our job.
Randy.
John, just a follow-up for you, but also for others. Right now there's a cycle track and there's a car lane. And you're proposing a whole range of vehicles between cars and bicycles.
Yes.
How does the infrastructure change when you've got a whole range of vehicles?
Yeah, well, that's going on already, of course. That in Holland, mopeds are driving on the before they drove on the bicycle lane, now they drive on the car lane, and they don't fit on either of them. So that's always a problem. Cyclists, they get scared because when a moped overtakes them, and when you're in a car, you're waiting for the moped to move over. So that's, I think, the thing about urban mobility, that it's a lot of give and taking and patience. But I think no lanes is better than lanes, actually. I think that same as with cars.
Might go away altogether.
I don't know if it will happen, but I think it's the same aspect with cars. If you have a very open cabin, like the pictures that you showed also, I think the driver is very visible, and he can see very well around him. And that creates another atmosphere and driving behavior than when you're in this safe cockpit and you think that nothing can happen to you. So I think that's the same in the lane story. Make sure that everyone is very visible, and of course there should be rules, but you cannot make enough lanes for all those different types of vehicles.
I think it's really a very regional, divided problem or effect. That in some cities they make really pure bike lanes or streets. In others, it's no problem to drive on the street because the car drivers take care of the others. In China, the stronger one has the priority and runs over everybody. So it's really cultural and regional, very different. But coming to the design point, for me, it's especially with coming back to the electrified bike. These are the missing link. Until let's say 10 years, there was the bicycle world and the motorcycle world, and two completely different customers, different thinking, different use of the vehicles. And now with the electrification, they're growing together. It's completely flowing from bicycle, pedelecs, speed pedelecs, and motorcycles. And I think there is, I think, a necessity not to make conversions of normal bicycles just to put an electric motor on it, but make really this new category of electric bicycles visible in another aesthetic, in another proportion, also with the advantages of the electric support, because 99% of the bicycles, the electric bicycles, are built like 100 years ago, the traditional bicycles, where you have the optimized ergonomics to put your power on the pedals, but it's not necessary anymore. You can sit much more relaxed on an electrified bicycle and can offer a much more relaxed geometry. So this is something designers and engineers should really focus on to create appropriate vehicles. In this field, leave the bicycles, the traditional, like they are. They are perfect, they are beautiful, they are machines which are really for specialists or for people who love it, and make this new category look different.
For me, the issue, and it's a challenge in the whole movement, I think, is this infrastructure, expensive, big battles, reallocation of space. And then you talk to the Danes, who actually, they do their annual survey in Copenhagen of what the cyclists think the problem is. You ask the cyclists 5-10 years ago, they said the problem's the cars. You ask the cyclists now, the problem is other cyclists. There's too many of them, they go too fast, they're on my lane, some go too slow, they wobble, so be careful what you wish for. And the issue is then, in Copenhagen, they really need the next generation cycling infrastructure, which is emerging, calling itself superhighways and mass transit and this kind of thing, which are effectively the whole lane, or the equivalent of the whole lane. Now you can just keep follow that down, and you end up with needing all of the infrastructure for everybody. And the debates, well, what about buses? Because most advocacy movements and most cities that support cycling also support public transport. What are you going to do with all of these? What actually decides it is the interaction between those vehicles when they're going to be there. If you can't trust the interaction, one's going to go fast and erratically one's going to go slow, you have to separate them. But you actually look at what's happened in centre of Seville, or you look at the kind of, I think much of residential Netherlands and I think Germany very, very early on as a country in road safety terms dealt with residential speed, and 30 kilometres an hour became normal, that kind of thing. And those relationships became manageable in the environment without heavy investment in infrastructure. Countries that refuse to deal with the relationship between speed and mode have to build infrastructure. And so if you're going to let people drive at 50 kilometres an hour, you're going to let vehicles do that. And if you introduce mopeds and e-pedelecs and super e-pedelecs and super turbo Watsits and they're going to do 50 kilometres an hour, we're just going to have the same mess. And certainly on many really unpleasant experiences on Netherlands cycle lanes with scooters, who are just as terrifying as the cars are, but they're in your space.
Right.
So, and it's about speed and noise. So at some point, we've got to address the fact there is no point us building 100 kilometre an hour supercharged super pedelecs of some kind and then mixing them with cyclists. And we just fought a big campaign in the European Parliament to get that regulated, that the so-called pedelec would be 25 kilometre an hour. But pretty much the industry's just decided to ignore that and introduce a new category that's going to carry on business as usual and go up to 50 kilometres an hour. Personally, I think that's a disastrous move. And if there's anybody in the room working on it, I'm sorry, it's your project, but it is completely disastrous for cycling. That we just want to keep throwing engines of different sizes together and expect them to mix. So speed policy is crucial for what we want to create in the future if we have shared space. If we don't, it's going to cost us billions to keep separating people.
But on the other side, the 25, I'm totally with you that 25 is not in a city, but many people commute or going really between villages, and then 25 is really a pain if you ride against this wall and it doesn't go faster, and then you wanted to have...
Sure.
So it should be both. And, it's really, maybe there's a regulation, so switching the systems. Within a city you may only drive 25.
I think if you're talking about rural riding and activities and sports, there's a degree of that. But I have to say, somebody who lives in Brussels, the average commuter travelling from a very, very long way into Brussels in his car would be delighted to do 25 kilometres an hour, even on the freeways. So, okay, it is an aspiration to do that, but I mean, in reality, we also know we get smooth traffic flows, and it will encourage people, if necessary, if they really have to go that bit faster, towards public transit and shared mobility and those kind of things. So, but once those people come together, we have to manage that speed relationship. No question.
So Kevin, as you're talking about the speed issue, we're talking a little bit in terms of some outliers and some future possibilities that become a problem. A big issue I think that we've got in certainly Southern Europe and in the United States is building basic cycling infrastructure. Yeah. A barrier to that I've seen in talking with the city planners in Chicago is the high cost of a protected lane. Yeah. And I don't know if this is just Chicago, where the government's the government, but maybe you could give me a European perspective. The folks in Chicago say that it costs about $100,000 to build a kilometer of protected bike lane. Is that about the same cost as in Europe, or is that excessively high? And to me, it's paint and some plastic cones. Why?
It's interesting. The de facto international standard has almost become the kind of Dutch model, and I think people say, hey, how come? Well, this. But I actually think if you look further into Dutch, and I apologise to Dutch people in the room, but sitting from outside, there is a culture of civil engineering to an extraordinarily high standard in the Netherlands. If you don't do civil engineering well, that country drowns. Never mind bicycles, frankly. It's just a joke. The country will drown unless the
We're great swimmers.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a culture of planning, of urban planning and urban design, building satellite towns in reclaimed land. And I think there's a systematic understanding of civil planning and civil engineering. And with that goes an aspiration of quality. I mean, you can put a roundabout in, you can see an infrastructure investment, and the numbers that the Dutch will quote for how much they're going to spend is absolutely extraordinary. And people, even in neighbouring countries like Germany, will just fall over and go, how much? But the quality is extraordinary. But that applies to an awful lot of other things like town planning and development and water management and other issues in that environment. Actually, when you ride around Copenhagen, you see segregated cycle lanes. But as often as not, you've still got to bounce your bike up the curb, and there's a bit of blue paint joining the bits up. And okay, the straight line bits work, but they feel like bits of the street that were grabbed. Mm-hmm. And they feel cheaper, and there's a much more a willingness to compromise. And you would never build the Copenhagen infrastructure in some of the Dutch cities that are most committed, because they wouldn't accept the compromises. So I'm much closer to the idea of where you are, which is, and in many cases even starting by, let's just put some flower pots down the middle. And then, interestingly, where do you put the cars? Well, put the cars as a natural barrier where they're parking between the vehicles on one side and the cyclists. So there are the need to spend 15 million just to consider a single road junction has become a bit of a kind of theme, and my personal view is we're beginning to price ourselves into stupid places. The most cost efficient is to build it as you build. So if a new road, a new railway station, a new underpass gets built, then you think cycling as you do it. That then shares the cost. But no, I do worry about what I hear about some of the stories of you've got to build it like the Dutch.
Yeah.
Stephan, if we look in terms of technology, what is the car industry doing? Because bicycles and cars are they're going to be sharing the streets, that's for sure. Sometimes there's a cycle lane, but is anything being done to make sure the person behind the steering wheel is seeing the bikes better? Technology, gadgets that just make this living together. That's what it is basically in the urban world. Yeah. Safer, better.
This is definitely a big topic. So the whole recognition of people, of bicycle drivers, especially by shifting lane, or if you oversee a bike driver, there is ideas for the bike industry, so that the bicycle drivers are better visible. You see them better by maybe flashing lights, other signals. But this is some passive things, and the other one is really by radio controlled and chips. That there is a system that cars recognize, for example, school kids. The car industry developed a little, I don't know if it's RFID chips that are integrated into the school bags. So if a child runs between two cars on the street, the car recognizes that there's a child coming and brakes automatically. This development is coming, but it's something, high-class cars, very expensive ones, and maybe it's only 1% that they recognize. But this is maybe a technology that's spreading more and more, and maybe these chips are integrated into bicycles and so on, and it becomes cheaper and a standard. So this could be an interesting development to prevent accidents. But another thing with the public transport lanes, our mayor from Munich, Christian Ude, he is a big fighter for cycling and is building public bicycle lanes like hell the last 10 years. And there was just a story that he visited China and had a lecture in the Tongji University. And then he told the students, yeah, I'm so proud that in the last years we built again 200 miles of bicycle lanes, because the future in the urban mobility is bicycles. And the whole audience of Chinese students just were laughing, saying, this stupid guy, what is he telling us, who want to drive cars? So this is just a little story about cultural difference.
Yeah.
You know, sticking to technology, we talked a lot about. Oh, sorry, Stan. Do you want to say something?
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead, please.
But back to the beginning, how do you get someone who doesn't need a bike right now, get on a bike, get them to ride the bike in all these Eastern, Southern European cities that don't need a bike right now? How do they get on a bike?
I don't think we should underestimate the enthusiasm that is emerging in some of those cities to do things like public bike sharing. Now, let's face it, who'd be stupid enough to ride a bike in Paris? Honestly, you've seen French drivers, and then suddenly we put public bike sharing in, and it's the sexiest thing on the planet, and every city mayor wants one. How did that happen? That was just like in London. You must be bonkers to ride a bike in London, you know, without a suit of armour and anything else. And public bike sharing is like a drug that mayors want. But it solves part of the problem, which is, can I have a try? Can I go with my friends? Can I, yeah, you can bully your friend and go, look, you don't have to buy a bike. So there's an enthusiasm for that as one mechanic, I think. The other process that I think the industry has to get much better at is going to where the people are and doing the kind of test days and tries. I mean, everybody here has done kind of mountain bike test days, I guess. You take some bikes up on the hills, you invite some journalists, and everybody has a great time. But how many times do we do that at employers? How do we pick off Siemens and BMW and, I mean, municipalities? Routinely, you know, your average city municipality employs 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people. So what's the program for taking the bikes into there and letting people have a try, this amazing gear that you guys are producing? Because that, you've got to open that kind of thing up and probably work with advocacy groups and cycle trainers and people like that who'll actually get you the invitations. There is a massive hurdle to overcome. What is uniquely different about cycling is that when you do it, people never stop smiling. You know, it's one of the best days out you can ever do is take a bunch of bikes to people who don't cycle and never try it. But we have to change the way we market. We cannot wait for people to come to us. We've either got to put the bikes in the street where they are, or we've got to go to them and sell in. We're sorry, I have to say just bike shops ain't doing it. Very, very few bike shops are doing the job that we need done, unfortunately. It's not a strong industry.
Yeah.
Should be the start to get people to ride bikes, because like you said before, that's really inventing these perfect layouts for the bicycle paths. And it's people inventing it, not the politicians giving it to some positions like
In some cases, the politicians, the cities will support you. You know, some of the work we do, particularly in Eastern Europe, is with cities that are extremely supportive. They don't really know how either. You get this extraordinary reaction where they go to the kind of biggest retailer in town and say, can we take 20 bikes to the workforce? And the retailer goes, well, you know, that's not what we do.
Yeah, we just did a very nice experience at BMW together with our health marketing. That because BMW is quite a little part of the city of Munich, so the whole northern area is BMW, and we have a circle bus line where the employees can change the office, but it's sometimes a pain. It takes time when it's rains. But the health management hired the 2 years ago the Deutsche Bahn bikes, and every BMW employee can rent it for free because they know the mobile phone number, and it's such a big success because they are much faster. They love it. There's a little move. They move a little bit, and it's growing and growing extremely. And even people who didn't use a bicycle are so happy now. Yeah. So this is a quite, like you said, put it into the companies, to the large customers, and spread it there.
Yeah, no question.
I mean, Stan, what is your view on that? How to get these people to ride bikes?
I like the bike share idea. And we're excited this summer in Chicago to start bike share. And Randy, I think we're going for 4,000 bikes across to start. And I've always thought that would be great for for people that are moving from the train stations to the office, or for the tourists that are in town. But I like the point that it's a great opportunity for people that don't bike to try it, and those that do try it and like it will very quickly say, well, that was nice, but I'd like to have a lighter bike than a bike share bike. And they'll go to the store and buy one.
That's what you see in Amsterdam, the tourism on bicycle. That's tremendous. That's people from all over the world doing their first meters and kilometers on a bicycle and in the heavy traffic. But
what we haven't cracked yet is public bike sharing, including an e-bike dimension. And talking to JC Decaux a couple of weeks ago when I was down in their Paris branch, this kind of their biggest system they run. So our cities tell us they want it, but nobody knows how to run it yet. We're not, the economics work on 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 units. The planning works because there's always a number of bikes at each station. As soon as you get maybe 5-10% e-bikes, and we've got to know if they're charged, and we don't know whether to charge a premium or not, and this is a much more expensive unit, which is going to attract vandalism and theft. So we haven't cracked it yet. So there is an e-bike dimension to public bike sharing, I think, that's coming, that nobody's actually cracked, and not at proper operable scales. 1 or 2 people think they can do it small scale with hotels, but the idea of a 15,000 bike fleet with 10-15% e-bikes is one of our future dimensions that nobody's cracked. And when they do, it'll be a very powerful lever.
I think also the finding safe places for people to ride or making them feel safe, enabling them to feel safe on the bike is really a concern. Some of the market research that we've done in the States show that 20% of the people are just never going to be bike riders, and 20% of the people are either enthusiast cyclists or they cycle comfortably, and then there's the middle part, the 60% of the people are interested in cycling but concerned for their safety, and I think the way we get more people on bikes is enable them to feel safe, and that's just a good step for the way cities are and the way that we live as a society.
Kevin, if we look at the bike sharing schemes, do you have say the best example across Europe in terms of safety, in terms of numbers, in terms of ease of use to actually
I mean, Paris is just outstanding. I have to say, on the volumes they've done, in the environment and where they've done it, and the kind of operability of the system. And I mean, Decaux is the biggest operator, and they number it. The tricky bit is they run to a system done by each city. The city commissions it, so they're all slightly different. So what they haven't got is like the Deutsche Bahn interchangeability. You have to join again for every city and kind of have a different model, which is frustrating. But I mean, I think the bigger operators, Fixie in the US, those guys are really getting some of the stuff together. The disaster that sticks out is Melbourne. The Melbourne scheme stopped, collapsed, and we know what killed it. We know cycle helmets killed it. It appears to be pretty well impossible to run a bike share scheme in a compulsory helmet environment, and it remains the most kind of soul-destroying and destructive subject in cycling. Quickly move on, but it killed Melbourne. So we've got to be, how the Canadian schemes go is going to be really, really interesting, because they got compulsory helmet in Canada, and Vancouver's talking about their scheme, and Toronto, various others. So it'll be very interesting. But I think the bigger European schemes, London is again outstanding relative to the size. It needs to be twice as big, but it's a really well-run scheme.
Kevin, do these bike share programs need to be subsidized, or they've gotten to the point of professionalism where they're actually break even or making money?
Let's just say the most of the people I talk to, that remains commercially confidential. But pretty sure from the city side, there's a degree of subsidy, often based on public policy. I mean, the idea that we the city want this to happen, it's part of our mobility, we subsidise the buses, we subsidise the metro, therefore we will subsidise this. through to a much more, it's got to pay its way. My understanding is the original Deco Clear Channel model where advertising on the street paid for the bike system became unfashionable for about 5 years. Cities felt a bit uncomfortable with relationship with kind of advertising, and they decided, for example, the London model is a sponsor plus city subsidy. But with the recession, the advertising model is coming back into favour, and simply because the cities cannot, or they're trying to find a way of subsidising either through sponsorship or through advertising to kind of bring those schemes back.
Speaking of recession, have you seen negative pressure put on planned bike share programs with the austerity measures in Europe?
I haven't heard of any cancellations. I mean, we're certainly, some people are very, very slow. Some of the contractual terms, Copenhagen system has taken far too, has been offline and is due to come and has sort of restarted false starts. There's a lot of false starts in Canada. The Vancouver scheme has gone backwards and backwards and backwards, and I don't know if that's economics or simply the kind of politics and contractual deals of putting it in. So very few people realise how long it takes to put one in. Particularly complex political environments where you have mayors and boroughs and national and policy. A single city administration can actually cut through a lot of that, but some of our bigger cities are very complex places to work politically and struggle to get it going. But it's, if you think Spain's now got 20 cities with a reasonable size scheme, it's a really powerful, and I think we've got high hopes for New York. They had 5,000 sign-ups in the first week of sign-ups, that kind of thing. So it's good. It's a really good tool.
Gunnar, you had a question.
Yeah, so we talk about safety, we talk about politics, politicians, we talk about all these infrastructure, but I want to focus on the opposite way. Like what happened in Berlin is a subculture, Fixie style retro thing. There's nothing politics, there's nothing infrastructure, and it brings us a lot of great publications and great media. So my focus is not about the retro thing, but to jump the question, what is the style, design-wise future of the bicycle? So what is the Fixie road career style guy in 10 years looking like?
Well, Fixie is of course it's the bicycle how it was invented 100 years ago. It's the simplicity of the phenomenon bicycle. It's two wheels, a chain. I think that the problem that the bicycle design has had over the last years is that everything you add to a bicycle takes away some of the simplicity and elegance of a bicycle. I think the Fixie is so interesting because it's so pure. It's just what you need to cycle and nothing more. When you look at bicycle design contests, nobody ever draws mudguards, locks, lights, because they clutter the bicycle design. But we need them. So I think that's the struggle that's been going on forever, and I think also in that sense the electric bicycle is an opportunity because it opens a route to other types of vehicles that not necessarily need to be classic frame types. Like Stephan was also saying, there will be new possibilities, new frame technologies except for tubes. So. But I think a bicycle should stay a bicycle. I think there's space to develop other types of vehicles that are close to a bicycle, that are maybe in between an electric bicycle and a moped, so very light mopeds, for instance. But I don't think there will be another archetype for the bicycle.
One of the things that I saw with the Fixies as they came out, first of all, I didn't like them because they didn't have any gears or brakes or things on them. I didn't have anything to sell to a Fixie. But beyond that, what I really liked about them was they were bringing new entrants into the cycling world. I think a large portion of the young people that started riding Fixies would not have ridden a bike unless it was a Fixie. It was a lifestyle statement. There was something about it that talked to them personally.
It's a skill.
It's a skill.
Yeah.
And I think that enabled a new segment of the population to get comfortable on bicycles. And then I think they got to their early 20s or mid 20s and they thought, you know what, some bikes and some gears and some brakes actually would be nice. And maybe they moved out of their first city and they got to a new city, and so they felt comfortable buying a bike with more components on it. But I think it was a great way to expand the market, and I think it's done a good job.
Actually, I think it was the other way around. People had a bike and then got a Fixie, so they got into the mood of having the second bike. And now they're maybe thinking about getting a third bike. They got used to having more than just that one bike that was useful. They got a second bike that was cool and had, some fashion.
Some fashion to it.
I think, but it became fashion. At the beginning was just a practical issue because nobody was stealing these bikes from the bike curious. They drove it because they had the skill, but they drove it that they could hop on and hop off without locking it because nobody is taking it and drives it. So that was the original story, and then it became cool. So,
yeah. I mean, there's points in a lot of the people in the Fixie guys were very attached to the advocacy movement. They're actually in that counterculture, and they're in similar kind of people to the world many of our members inhabit. But I have no interest whatsoever in being stuck with the 1% or the 5%. So the Fixie culture exists in Amsterdam and Copenhagen, and it exists in Vienna, and it's kind of part of the movement, but it remains the kind of 1%, and it particularly remains a way of being different.
Yeah,
and then it's
like longboards.
I mean, if around the world we've got people like Tweed Club is coming along, where people want to go back riding 1930s tweed in various countries and various patterns, and it's fantastic. But if we want to get 30, 40, 50% cycling, you've just got to be able to stand up in the clothes we're all wearing here, walk outside, pick up your bike, and it's got to work. And it is as simple as that, because you would not dream of changing your clothes to drive your car unless you're going to drive a veteran car, or you particularly, if you drive a Lamborghini, you actually install your automatically selected blonde woman next to you, and you kind of do all that kind of stuff. But so there are rules in certain classifications of cars. But the one you go to the shops in is brutal normality. What we can learn from the car industry is how to make normality sell. And that's, what a job. How can we make that normal be attractive and differentiate brands and make it important to have normal in your life? But I've no interest in sticking around with the 1%. Or the 2 or 3%, and in some cities it's slightly more, but it doesn't take us anywhere to build our cycling culture around the 1%. Same with sport, or same with mountain biking. It has a place, but it's not for our urban future.
But still, H&M produces a bike clothing line or in terms of Fixie bikes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's but in the cities where that culture is often strongest, they're often the cities with a very low mode share. Berlin ran quite a long way behind a lot of the German cities for quite a long time. It's a particularly countercultural city, and it's got a lot of those trends, and it's begun to move out, and you now see more normal people cycling in Berlin, and that's where the growth's come from. The real growth. If you want a city, a population of 500,000, 1 million to cycle, we need 300,000, 400,000 people cycling regularly. We don't need 20,000 outliers cycling regularly. It doesn't do anything for us.
No, but I think they do create the market. I think when the bicycle becomes a way of expressing yourself, that is a very strong tool to market the whole phenomenon of cycling, of course.
And I think also the fashion industry helps to bring it into the mass and into the minds.
Yeah.
More and more companies putting cool people, business people with bicycles on their advertising, and it's just win-win situation.
I think we have a question in the back.
Basically, that was the point, that if you have these movements that display that bicycle or urban mobility example, electric bicycles or normal bicycles are cool, then you attract the masses, or you mobilize the masses to go bicycle, buy a bicycle.
The argument is that to be a cyclist, I have to be different. I have to wear funny clothing, either lycra or kind of hippie chic. You know, I've got to do something weird to do this. You know, and if you self-limit that, whereas in the, I mean, you know, you take to our high cycling volume countries, and I include Germany in that mix now, and I include Sweden, that kind of stuff, it's the normality which actually starts to bring the big volume. And I think in terms of, you know, SRAM Urban and part of the purpose of us being here, you can attach yourself to that to a point to break your product out and make it cool. But there is a point at which you need 300, 400,000 users per city, and they're going to be as normal as you can make it. So, back to the car industry, learn how to make normal interesting. It isn't just about outliers. It's about bringing in and saying, right here and now, where's the next 100,000 people going to come from?
There might also be a need for a new node, which is, again, probably the task of the designers or the bicycle industry. Like, all of us have smartphones. And the smartphones brought a company that was an underdog for a long time to the mainstream. So having a phone now is having a smartphone. So probably there's a need, maybe not a need, but it might be one should keep their eyes open for an iPhone bicycle.
I think it's the city bike. I mean, you can't, except, you know, Parrot, 100,000 trips a day, 50% market share on trips on some major corridors, because someone brought a technology and a tool that was kind of in your pocket. Actually, it wasn't. It's your pass card that's in your pocket, but they made that happen. And then it has spawned people, well, I shall get a bike now, and I'll do other things. It's gone the really big numbers. Think 100,000 trips a day.
But I think just mentioning your smartphone, this is a perfect example of a company who did an integrated product that really fits hardware and software perfectly together. In the bike industry, we have multiple suppliers of components. We have only the bicycle brands are mainly just frame designing companies who pick the components. We have different and standardized joints or Schnittstellen interfaces. Yeah, so it's just a mix and match. And there's no, like in the car industry, we have an overall car engineering concept. So we see it as one product and engineer everything together with the lights, with the electronics. So we don't say we go to Hella and just buy the headlights and go to this one and take just the seat. It's one product. And I think this is one of the biggest handicaps in bike industry, to go really on the next step and bring a product that surprises people. So maybe the bike industry should work much more together. The best example is now the electrification with the electric motor suppliers. They just build their motors. They don't talk to the bike industry. Maybe the gear shifter is ruined after 1,000 kilometers because the power in the front is like 3 super trained Tour de France drivers. So as long as the bicycle industry doesn't get together and think about new standards and integrated product development, there will be no change, no big one.
Yes, Stan, what is your view on this? And
I agree with you, Stephan, and I think that that's why I like where SRAM is positioned in that progression, because we offer the broadest range of components on the market, and to the extent the bike brands really want to get together and design an integrated system and an integrated bike, we're a good option for them to come talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joe, you had a question.
But don't you feel that you could also play a stronger role in that, in developing bicycle concepts yourself?
You know, I don't know that we'll play a stronger role in developing the bicycle concepts unless our product development group has some ideas they haven't told me about.
Not necessarily.
Which is often the case. But I think we're a unique and flexible partner in the bike industry in a way that others are not, to have an open dialogue and talk about those possibilities.
Yeah. Because you have, of course, the same role as Intel has, that only Intel goes inside and your components is more visible, but it's a technical benefit to the bicycle, but not necessarily a part of the design. Yeah. So that's often the problem of a bicycle, that every component and frame supplier does their best to create the best possible piece, and then somebody decides to bring that together, and this the culture of developing an integrated concept just doesn't exist well enough yet.
You know, it's possible in the bike industry, but the bicycle industry will need to evolve. Yeah. There's, in the automobile industry, to get that to occur, there is a lot more trust between the car brands and their suppliers, and they're working together with longer-term contracts and commitments. In the bike industry, we have no contracts. Yeah. You know, typically we have a soft commitment by a bike brand to specify our product for a model year. And, you know, in that context, it's really hard to do a 2 or 3 year product development effort to come out with customized components for a particular bike design. Yeah. But, you know, we are certainly open to that conversation, and I also recognize that that's a challenging thing for the bike brands to do as well. So we're open to the conversation. I think it's a difficult step for the bike industry to take. If they did, I think we'd have a better bike overall.
I think it's an interesting challenge just to get on in urban too. Because I think your comment about Fixie and others comment about kind of simplicity, and the conversations this morning about urban simplicity, because, you know, where enthusiasts actually cared which components were on their bikes, the kind of simplicity of urban is, I care that it works. I care that it delivers me from here to here, and objectives like much less visits to the bike shop, and, you know, puncture proof and a whole set of parameters drive that in a different way. And it's enormously difficult for someone in your position to persuade the bike manufacturers that have spent 30 years selling, it's got more gears, you know, it does sexier things, it's lighter, that there are only a limited number, I think, of companies who actually understand, in the same way we said there's only a limited number of companies who understand advocacy, who actually understand urban and what might be next in urban.
So you had a question in the front.
Yeah, I think it goes in the same direction. Kevin already said cars won't disappear. They're kicked out of the city. If they're electrified, they won't come back anymore. They're out of the city. The city's taken over by bikes, scooters, some transportation, cars, trucks. BMW and the car industry in general has a problem. They're developing bikes already. But for the car industry, it can be a problem, people discovering bikes. Now, what's the view of the car industry on future mobility? Are you going to develop more bikes?
No, I think that there won't be a radical change. It's a tendency. Of course, we observe that it's shifting from the cars get less interesting all over the world, especially in big cities. Many young people don't do a driver's license anymore. and or don't have access to cars, and that's why the board and the management decided to offer services to car sharing systems, connectivity systems, just really to transfer the company into a company that can survive in the future and offers different mobility systems. Bicycle is a little part. We look at it. It's interesting, of course, but we have BMW motorcycle. It is a big, that's where we come from originally. And this will also step into, move from, now we get offer the scooters, the combustion engine scooters and the electric scooters, the big ones. And this will also change to this urban mobility, because at the moment they're selling high-priced super machines that only the silver age old people can afford, and they're dying out by the time, and young people need other products, and we will offer other products then also in this field. And especially two-wheeler scooter mobility in Southern Europe, Italy, France, Spain, it's a majority of the traffic. It's attractive, it's cheap, it's cool, and it's chic. I think one special thing is everything you do, it must look cool and be sexy, and that people have a desire to own it and to have it or to drive it and to show off. In the past, nobody put in the public parks a scooter. I say, okay, or a motorcycle, let's keep it out. Now when you see people in the parks hanging around, they're standing some electric bikes or very high-end normal bicycles because they are cool. And I think that it must be the next, again, a design point. They must be attractive. Maybe you work together with fashion industry. There's a lot going on. G-Star, for example, is now heading the motorcycle segment and in their communication. So maybe this is something where the bicycle industry should go out and find new partnerships also for communication.
I don't think the bike industry does enough selling of sex, I have to say. And I mean that glibly because it gets an audience to smile, but years back in kind of my career in the food industry, things like that, one of the early lessons I was taught in marketing was that, when you put an individual in the marketing, you've either got to want to be that person or you're going to want to sleep with them, which is why the image has got to be attractive. But it's one of those kind of, particularly for the younger market, we're not positioning the kind of meet in the park, boy meets girl, bicycles as a kind of corridor to kind of that habit. Cars have done that fantastically for kind of 70, 80 years. The American dream, the soft top, the kind of all that stuff. And we completely and utterly miss that kind of attractiveness of meeting people by bicycle in what we do. And I think your description of people in parks around scooters, around bicycles is hugely missing from much of our marketing and sales.
Well, it is being done, but not by the main bicycle brands.
Yeah, the main bicycle guys.
It's done by the small labels, by the Johnny Locos and Van Moves.
Exactly.
Joe, you had a question.
Bicycles haven't been that sexy for BMW too. I mean, you're selling bicycles for years, and I see more like something, if someone's buying a car and asks for a discount, you put a bicycle in the trunk, and that's it.
Yeah, that's not true. We are selling a lot of bikes. There are some as a discount, of course, but the majority are sold, and they were selling very well, especially the kids' bikes we developed. That's a very interesting thing. It's really the most expensive walking bike and kids' bike on the market, but it is an integrated story where this kids start. And I think this is, maybe this is the thing, you have to tell stories. Have a cool, simple product, and immediately you understand what's meant, and then it's a self-running.
But this is made by bicycle people.
What?
It's a children's bike.
No, I did it. Yeah, produced by development.
Stephan, speaking of partnerships, is there a way that the bike industry and the automotive industry could really partner in a way that the automotive industry could see it to their benefit to improve cycling infrastructure? And it occurs to me that in a congested city that I live in the city of Chicago, there's no appeal to having a high-end car because you're stuck in traffic all of the time. And if we could reduce some of that congestion, I think the automobile manufacturers could sell more high-end cars. Or for other reasons. I mean, how can we get the automotive industry and the cycling industry to be working on at least a similar agenda?
What you're telling, it's my wish. That is also the feedback when we were in Taiwan and also here at the bike manufacturers. The feedback was if the car industry would step into the bike industry and do really this overall engineering thinking with connectivity, with service development, could bring it on another level. And it's a cultural change, and it needs some time, but I think we will come together.
Terrific.
Any other questions in the audience?
You mentioned scooters already. Why would someone from Kiev take an electrified scooter instead of a bike in the future? Because they don't ride a bike anyway. Yeah. Scooter.
Oh, that's what I'm saying, that there will be a lot of opportunity for vehicles between a bike and a car, because not every country is as bicycle-minded as we are.
But how do we get them on a bike?
Well, yeah, that's not my goal.
I think you come back to, I mean, there are cultural, historic reasons why scooters are strong in some countries, Southern Europe, whatever. They've been well marketed, and there might be weather, might be all sorts of attractive things like that. But if you take, the prospect right now, we used the example of Ukraine, but if somebody said our marketing plan now is to suddenly introduce e-bikes to Ukraine, you sensibly should be removed from the room immediately for your own sanity, because if you won't ride a bike, you're not particularly going to ride a bike with an engine on it. You're certainly not going to upgrade from something that costs 100 euros to something that costs 2,000 euros to go and do something really, really unpleasant like try out Kiev traffic. So you've kind of got you've got to get the environment right for all of these elements to flourish. Maybe a scooter or some of the kind of small mobility car units that actually you can ride with a scooter license that feel like they've got a body shell, so you feel a bit more protected and do a slight psychological thing to make you go forward. But ultimately, we've got to crack the feeling I can do this, either by speed or by infrastructure or by allocation or by money, but you've got to get people doing it, and they will decide, I'd like one with an engine, or I'd like one without, or I'd like it to have 4 wheels or 2 wheels. But first of all, the concept of, yeah, this is possible, has got to be established.
Any other questions?
Maybe in a few words, if you could explain what makes the Paris or the London project so successful. Is it really the product alone? Is it marketing behind? Or just really briefly, what makes those examples so outstanding and makes them draw?
What makes it interesting for us, I think, all of us here, is that both Paris and London are now interestingly bike sharing in Taipei, which is up to 25,000 trips a day with virtually no stations in a really horrible cycling environment. It's a city set, and even more so by young women. Every rule we know about cycling says that young women should not be riding bikes in Taipei, and they are. 25,000 trips a day. Is that somehow we've inserted urban cycling into environments with no infrastructure. Infrastructure has followed. Paris got embarrassed and started spending money. London has now got embarrassed and started sending money, but they got very high usage numbers from public bike sharing. And it certainly appears there was a kind of zeitgeist, there was a consumer shift that this was actually quite trendy. It's the other group from the Fixie guys. The Fixie guys invested in their own bikes, but there's a whole bunch of people for health and congestion, and possibly just that the alternatives were so horrible. The undergrounds were full, the metros were full, the driving was pretty horrible. They certainly got pricing right, they got the systems right, they kind of made that work, made it low cost, but there is a degree of which it fitted the lifestyle. And I think my presentation earlier on, people have moved on. Young people are not having driving licenses. if we put the product that's easy to use, simple to use, on their doorsteps, in their hands, there seems to be a willingness to take it up. You know, I mean, we can't say in New York that the infrastructure in New York is already everywhere and ubiquitous, so that 5,000 people want to sign up to bike sharing on the first day. There is a momentum behind it that's really quite special, but I'm not sure we all completely understand it, because it breaks some of the rules. It certainly breaks the rule about you can't do this without infrastructure. So there's a lot to learn from that, and I think if I was, selling urban bicycles and parts and components, I think I'd want to study that a lot, because there's some very big markets.
Okay, I think the bike industry can support this trend also with this public sharing bikes very strongly if they develop theft protection in a way that it's attractive, that it's also maybe systems where people feel responsible for the bike if they use it, because if it's for free, you don't care about it. And in Paris, 50% of the bikes every year are stolen are in Eastern Europe and in Russia. Maybe it's all, again, think about in the bike industry, how do we develop a registration or theft protection system that makes it unattractive or to steal, and implement it in every bicycle.
And equally, I think one of the exciting things about our industry club is we have one or two people like Velopa, who's the biggest parking manufacturer in the Benelux countries. We have discussions with Vexo, with some other interesting people who are actually in bicycle parking. They actually desperately want to talk to the bike industry, because what you do will make or break their future. They're not sure how the hell to cope with e-bikes, and whether the people will even bother doing what's on here. Would you leave a €2,000 e-bike at a Dutch station? I don't know. But we're going to need to cater for that in the next 5 to 10 years. We're going to need to cater for it somehow. And so there's some interesting guys around who would be very happy to be in those kind of partnership discussions with you, I think, that could also be quite important.
Any other questions in the audience? Okay, perfect. Then I think thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just to be sure, so we'll have food served in the canteen area later on. But we're there for any questions for interviews and time there. So just make sure you just grab us, okay?
Are there cold beers in the canteen?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.